when somebody has a great idea that's going to make a difference in a kid's lives, that we find a way to support that. And that's what the culture of yes is about, is that I always try to start every leadership experience I have, and every question that's asked of me, of how can I say yes to what this person wants to do, especially if it's going to make a difference in kids' lives. And I don't start from a place of no or what the barriers are.
Right.
Certainly we have regulations and we have bosses and we have principals and superintendents and boards and people that are going to, create a sandbox for us. But inside that sandbox, there are a lot of toys to play with, and there's a lot of differences that we can make. And so that's what I think about when I think about being audacious. Is I start every day, every journey, every educational experience with trying to figure out a way to move our work forward in a spirit of optimism and saying yes to the ideas that people have.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion, my words got power, my thoughts have action, motivation, stay gracious, that's greatness, be audacious, motivation, be audacious, innovation, be audacious, inspiration, be bold, motivation, be audacious.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where we explore what it truly means to live your best audacious life ever. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, and I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for carving out time in your day to be a part of this conversation, to lean into curiosity, growth, and possibility. That choice alone says something powerful about who you are and who you want to be, who you want to grow into. So again, thank you. Today's episode is about education, leadership, and the courage it takes to rethink how we learn, how we lead, and how we build systems that actually serve people. At its core, this conversation asks a very powerful question. What happens when we stop preparing people for yesterday and start empowering them for tomorrow? So to help frame things, I want you to think of education like a garden. You can follow the same planting schedule year after year, use the same tools and expect the same results, or you can pay attention to the soil, the climate, and the people tending to it. Relevance is the soil. Curiosity is the sunlight. Leadership is a gardener who knows when to guide, when to step back, and when to trust growth. And technology, that's the tool. Powerful when used intentionally, harmful when it replaces a human hand. Today's conversation lives right at the intersection of all what I just described there. My guest today is Dr. James Lane. He's an educator, leader, and visionary who spent his career transforming the way students learn and how educators lead. James has served as a classroom teacher, principal superintendent, a state superintendent of education, and even a senior leader at the U.S. Department of Education. His journey began in a small town of Kentucky and carried him all the way to shaping education policy at the national level. He's the leader. He's also the author, of Leading with Laser Focus, The 7 Steps to School Success, a powerful framework for building thriving educational systems grounded in people, purpose, and possibility. At his core, James believes that education should be human-centered, curiosity-driven, and bold enough to evolve with the world around it. James embodies what it means to lead with relevance, and he understands that learning only sticks when students feel seen. That innovation requires trust, and that real leadership is not about control, but empowerment. In a time when education systems are under pressure and transformation is unavoidable, James brings clarity, compassion, and courage to the conversation. So let's dive in. We talk about curiosity as a catalyst for learning, the importance of building a culture of yes, and how educators can empower rather than restrict, and why technology must always serve humanity rather than replace it. So without any further ado, here's my chat with Dr. James Lane. Enjoy. Hey, James, thanks for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for taking the time to do this. It's fantastic. So thanks for being here, man. It's awesome.
I'm excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great. I oftentimes say it's the opportunity to sit down and share insights and the cool part is that you'll have listeners who will have an opportunity to eavesdrop on our conversation, and they could potentially take something to apply to their own lives in profound ways, and we may never ever know, and that's kind of the cool part of all this. And so thank you for being a part of this journey with me. um we oftentimes encourage that best audacious life that we talk about, right? And a big part of that is recognizing that our life, we're on a pathway, each our individual pathway, and it's up to us to make those decisions and those choices that get us to the place that we're that we need to be. And sometimes we've got to make those innovative and off the beaten path types of decisions that are unconventional or different from the norm, and a little bit of that you can kind of relate to in your own personal journey, professional journey as well. But those decisions that we make are all with the intent of kind of getting us to our ultimate greatness. And so maybe as a starting point, James, I can get you to introduce yourself to our audience, talk about the work that you do, and what's gotten you to the point that you're at now.
Yeah, thank you. Again, so excited to be on the show and look forward to this conversation today. I have worked in the education field throughout my career. I had a pretty cool journey. I was a kid from a very small town in Kentucky. In fact, I was looking on Zillow the other day, and the house I grew up in was on sale for $29,000 in today's money.
Wow.
And I'll tell a little bit more about the journey, but I ended up, working at the top levels of the U.S. Department of Education, having meetings in the White House, and just to go from that life of, humble beginnings in Kentucky throughout this journey, it's just been amazing. I started as a teacher. I was a band director, trumpet player, teaching kids music, and I took over a band program at a school where the school's performance had gotten so poor they closed the school, made all the teachers reapply for their jobs, and reopened the school as a year-round magnet school. And it was then that I got hired to be the band director at the school. I tell a joke in a recent book I wrote. Well, it's a story, but true story. But where I was interviewing for the job, and the principal did the classic. Well, we'll let you know if you got the job. And I walk out to my car. The assistant principal comes chasing me out to the car and says, "Look, you're the only applicant. Don't leave without telling us you're going to take the job." And that's that's how I got my first teaching job. But the day I got in that classroom with kids, I absolutely loved it, and realized that I wanted to make an impact on kids' lives the rest of my life. And even now, all these years later, 25 years later, it's amazing to me how many of them are working in music. Some of them are famous bass players, trumpet professors. Others are DJs. Others are music producers. Others maybe just play the radio. It doesn't matter. But I know that time that we had together changed their lives. And so I wanted to take that experience that I had in the classroom and make that possible for every kid. So I became a principal, eventually became superintendent in my district. I was a district superintendent in 3 school districts in Virginia, and I was honored when the governor called and asked me to be the state superintendent in Virginia. And we have one-term governors here. So at the end of his term, I went up to Washington, served at the U.S. Department of Education as the acting assistant secretary, and then now work in a private life. I was the CEO of a DC-based nonprofit, and now I work for a company out of Princeton, New Jersey. But I wrote a book recently, which is, I know one of the reasons we wanted to talk, and wanted to just tell those stories of how we went from, humble beginnings in Kentucky and band director to White House advisor, and certainly excited to share more about those stories.
Even saying that, like band director to national education leadership, is just wild to think about.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. I mean, there were times one of the offices in the White House called the Roosevelt Room. I remember I was sitting in the Roosevelt Room and I just can't believe I'm here. I just cannot believe I'm here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
I can see that. It's interesting because an expression oftentimes we'll use is that life, when you live life forward, it's an art. But when you sort of stop and look back at your journey, it very much is a science, and the dots all connect. So I had to do this to go here, to go here. But in that moment, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going by what makes sense. You're trusting your gut. You're winging it, so to speak. And so I'm wondering, were there any sort of decisions that you made on your pathway that turned out to be like really integral and important ones for you, that in the moment you didn't know, you just were like, let's do this?
For sure. I have a phrase that I use sometimes when I'm talking with folks about how opportunity feels like it's at the intersection of skill and luck. And, in a lot of ways, yeah, there are, like you said, there's a science of it as I look back, maybe, of
Right.
like, yep, this had to happen, so this could happen, then this, exactly like you said. But at each of those moments in time, I really do feel like I luckily walked into a moment, but the key to it is that at those moments, I had to have prepared myself, have the skills, have the competencies, the knowledge, so that when that moment came, I could strike while the iron was hot. And but one that really stands out to me is I remember I was a principal in or an assistant principal in Chesterfield, Virginia, where I later, many years later, became the superintendent. And I remember I became a finalist to be a principal at a school there. And I was interviewing with the superintendent at the time. I ended up following him years later.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, I want to be the superintendent in Chesterfield one day. What do I have to do? And he said, you're going to have to leave to come back. You're going to have to go get experience in central office, go be a superintendent and all of that. And all of my friends said, that'd be crazy. You should stay here and, become the principal and grow through the district. And I actually took that advice, and I left that year, and I became principal in another district, a smaller district. And 1 year later, they offered me to be assistant superintendent and principal, which was crazy. I did both jobs for a year, and then I became assistant superintendent. And 1 year after I became just assistant superintendent, the superintendent left, and the board hired me to be superintendent. I mean, literally without an interview, just offered me the job. And when I think back on that journey, I could have easily made the decision that most people have made to stay put. Right. And that job in that smaller district, it was an hour from my house. I drove an hour every day to work. And that was hard. I was just starting a family. I'd just gotten married. Yep. And had I not made that decision, I don't know that I would be where I am. I don't know that I've ended up working in the U.S. Department of Education or become the state superintendent. And so that moment of luck was important, but then I had to be successful, right? And that was the key to it, is that, as an educator, I spent a lot of time learning the craft and making a difference, so that, when these decisions points come that sometimes felt random, I was ready for that moment and ready to make a difference.
That definitely is a pivotal moment, and I can see that. In fact, it resonates with me so much. I remember sort of my career journey. Once upon a time, I was a commissioner of a basketball league here in Canada, and I had worked with the at that time the commissioner, who had been in the role for a couple of years. He was originally from the U.S. I'm based in Canada. It was a Canadian league, so he traveled from the U.S. to be here in Canada to work, and he initially did a 2-year contract. And during that time, we developed a relationship. I worked very closely with him. I didn't realize I was being mentored by him. I didn't realize that he was sharing and giving me insights and helping me develop. I don't even think he knew himself. We were just over the course of a relationship developing, and I was learning from him. And when it came to the end of his contract, he was negotiating with the board of directors, and he said, I've got this pull to go back home, right? Because again, I'm from the U.S. originally, but I want to stay here. And they were trying to find ways, and they were like, how can we do this? How can we do this? And they said, what do you feel about the idea of having a deputy commissioner? Like, if we got you a deputy commissioner to work alongside you to help relieve some of these pressures that you have and make it easier for, what do you think? And so, he was sort of thinking about it, humming and hawing it. They approached me informally and said, hey, this is what we're thinking about. What do you think? And I remember going, I don't know. I've never done that before. And I don't know if it was similar to your experience, but I actually doubted initially, going, nah, I don't think so. I'm not the one. And I came up with 1,000,001 reasons why it couldn't be me and it shouldn't have been me. And I eventually got to the point where, like, what are you doing? Like, this is an opportunity. Like, wake up. And I took that. And so during that time that, this dance was going between myself and the board, my friend, the commissioner, had made the decision, I'm going back home. And so he left. And so when I finally said yes, I didn't say yes to the role of deputy commissioner. I said yes to the role of commissioner because there was a vacancy as a result of him departing. So it just shows you that you've got to step into it and be ready. The question I wanted to ask you is sort of when you think about sort of that decision, those decisions, what role audacity played in that for you and your decision making?
Yeah, well, and you talking about basketball. I'm having a basketball moment this week. Before I get into the audacity question, I got to tell you this one just as a quick story. So I'm huge into basketball. Grew up in Kentucky. Went to the University of North Carolina. I mean, so like, I think I might be the only Kentucky UNC fan in the world. Because usually they don't like each other. And I've coached AAU basketball. Same kids for like almost 10 years. My son's one of them. And now he's taller than me. I'm about 5'11". My son is like 6'3", 6'4". And yesterday I was like, hey, let's play some one-on-one. We haven't played one-on-one in a while. And man, he beat me. I mean, like, but it's like the first time he beat me. There's been times where I let him win or, all that, build up his confidence. Literally yesterday, I tried to win and didn't win. And so now I'm having this moment, like, I'm getting to be 50 years old. He's 16. I mean, he's, hopefully supposed to beat me. But it's this like moment of, I woke up today and I'm different because my son is better than me in basketball. So you telling me that story is just getting me, but
no, and what's really powerful about that is I mean, for me, and I actually, there was a point in time when I stopped playing my son because I didn't want him to beat me anymore. I didn't want to have to lose to him. So I stopped playing him. I didn't want to be in that situation. But there is a point around this that, and also, and thank you for sharing that story because it's almost like a passing of the torch, so to speak, right? Like I think of all of the and I've coached as well, so I've done that journey with him, and throughout his coaching and his rep career and all that kind of stuff in AAU, and all the insights and as basketball very much is a thinking game. As much as there's athleticism and strategy, there's a thinking aspect, and I know that I've intentionally spent a lot of time teaching him how to think and encouraging him how to think. And so to know that he's at that point where all the lessons, right, that he's taken and incorporated into himself, he's now using that. That's fantastic. I just don't want them to use it against me. That's all. So.
No, I know exactly what you're thinking. I mean, I'll be honest, I even tried to do the thing we do in basketball where you get in somebody's head a little bit, and he just wouldn't have it. He's like, I'm going to shut you down today. I'm winning this game. So I appreciate it. But back to the other piece of it, living with audacity. There's, and I go back to the book. The book I recently wrote is called Leading with Laser Focus. And it's a book about my journey in education. But it's more of the stories of like the educators I work with and the differences that they've made in kids' lives. And, there's even stories about the difference they made in my son's life, who now, I love what you're saying there about this passing the torch. I'm a little bit sad that I'm not better than him in basketball, but I'm getting older and my back hurts today. But when I'm proud of him because he's becoming a man and he's becoming a great player and all of that. And I enjoy watching him and that's what I enjoy about education is I enjoy working with people and watching them make a difference in kids' lives. And so this, I have this story I tell in the book about developing a culture of yes. And I found that in my journey, so many times at work, people want to structure what you're going to do around what you're not allowed to do. Right. Let's talk about the things we can't do and then let's figure out what we can. And I just can't live like that. Like I try to be optimistic every day. There are certainly going to be tough things that happen and issues that we have to deal with. But when I think about schools and, everybody has a schooling story because we all went to school, and when I think about that time that we get with kids and as an educator, I recognize I spend more time with, kids in schools than sometimes I do with my own family. We should make that a happy place. And we should make that a place where we're making a difference in kids' lives. And we shouldn't be thinking constantly about the barriers in front of us. And yes, schools need to improve. But the way that we're going to improve schools is first by trusting and lifting up our teachers. I mean, paying them more for sure. But beyond that, it's about making sure that when somebody has a great idea that's going to make a difference in a kid's lives, that we find a way to support that. And that's what the culture of yes is about, is that I always try to start every leadership experience I have and every question that's asked of me of how can I say yes to what this person wants to do, especially if it's going to make a difference in kids' lives. And I don't start from a place of no or what the barriers are.
Right.
Certainly we have regulations and we have bosses and we have principals and superintendents and boards and people that are going to, create a sandbox for us. But inside that sandbox, there are a lot of toys to play with and there's a lot of differences that we can make. And so that's what I think about when I think about being audacious. Is I start every day, every journey, every educational experience with trying to figure out a way to move our work forward in a spirit of optimism and saying yes to the ideas that people have.
I love the idea of having a culture of yes, and it's funny, and you're right. Everyone has a sort of an education story. In fact, if you go if you go to 10 people and you say, tell me who your favorite teacher is, everyone's got one. Every single person has their favorite teacher. You take that a step further and say, why? You're going to probably hear things like they listened to me, they encouraged me, they supported me. These are all things that are within our disposal. So when you tell me that, many of your students are still in music in some capacity, DJing, trumpet playing, whatever it is that they're doing, there's something about what you had done that encouraged that lit that fuse, that let it go. So I'd love to kind of hear about, that approach that you took, and what was it that was so impactful in the way you taught those students to inspire them the way you did.
So for me, I remember this story when I first started teaching, that, I worked in a school that I mentioned had struggled with test scores and all of that. But I saw amazing potential in the kids that were in my classroom. And but this was my first job out of college when I was teaching. And I remember walking into the classroom, and I came from UNC Chapel Hill, and I wanted to teach the music that I was taught to teach kids. And so I took a very classical approach. Mm-hmm. And immediately I started to have classroom management issues, and I was like, man, I know I'm doing a good job here. I know I'm really helping these kids understand this music, but I can't seem to get them excited and engaged. And I remember I was sitting down with a student, and he was like, man, are we ever going to play any of the music that we listen to? And I thought, oh, wow. And, I thought about even growing up as a kid myself, that the music that often was picked for my band was the music that my band director liked. And you know what? I came to like that music, but I didn't get into music to play music that other people were going to, force me to listen to. I wanted to be able to play the things that I like and make music.
Right.
Later, I became a jazz musician. I made my own music, and so I went home that night, and at the time, Outkast was huge. Which for those of you young people, yeah, there you go, yeah. But the song that rings out to me is what "So Fresh and So Clean" was on the radio. So fresh and so clean, right? And so I remember I went home that night and I transcribed it for the band, and it had this like bass line that was like dum dum da 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 da, right? And so I wrote that part out. I wrote a little bit of a drum beat. I brought it into class the next day, and the kids were just they just knew I was going to play some song about dinosaurs or whatever we've been working on, and I had them sight read that song. And immediately there was like an hey, and everybody went crazy, and the drummers started making their own beats, and people started riffing over top of it. And I saw a spirit and an excitement from the kids that like it changed me in that moment. And I thought, you know what? As a teacher, I'm always going to focus on what my kids want to know, and through those lessons, I'll teach them the things that I want them to know, or that they have to learn for the state standards or whatever. And so that really followed me, in that education is about relevance. It's about finding that relevant moment that kids have and helping them find how they can see themselves in the math, right? Maybe it's something about how they are dealing with their money or whatever, and all of that. And so I really worked hard to make education more relevant for my kids. And when I did that, they loved my class. And the classroom management issues were gone. We had amazing results. Years later, I took the band to competitions. They got the highest ratings you can get at competitions. And now, of course, many of them are musicians, as I mentioned before. So that's what it was for me, was finding that spark, that it wasn't about me or what I wanted. It was about what they wanted and what they wanted to learn.
I love it. I mean, I love the song too, but I mean, aside from that, I think the idea of taking that very innovative approach, I can see where can be challenging because you are now fighting against a system that has established parameters. Here's a curriculum. Here's the music. Here you go, James. Let's go teach it. Like, and so that journey, that must. I'm curious. Was that a battle, or what was that like for you?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned in my recent book, it's called Leading with Laser Focus. The subtitle is the 7 Steps to School Success. And what I try to tell people through that is, yes, you have to have structure, right? Like you're not just going to like go in and have fun in class every day and think that kids are going to learn. Like we have basic skills that are super important right now. And if you've seen, the latest results after, the pandemic and everything that's happened, is that, results are in a kind of 20-year decline. It's like the worst results we've seen for our schools in 20 years. But we can turn that around if we, engage our students with the best learning possible, which is what I was talking about there, but think about ways that we can structure our schools for success. And so this 7-step process that I created, and also this flexibility and for this culture of yes, and this academic optimism, but it also shows you, there is a way to organize this so you can make a difference in kids' lives. You talked about curriculum. Yeah, first, we have to know what our curriculum is. We have to be aligned to it. We have to know what's being expected of our kids. Second, we have to have a relentless focus on people. In fact, the phrase that I use is, if you're going to be maniacal about anything, be maniacal about people, making sure that you have the best people in every seat. The third thing I talk about is we got to know where kids are. And so we got to have assessments that can make sure that at any moment in time, we know exactly where kids are. Then we got to make sure we take that information and put it to action. And so the 4th step is all about making data-driven decisions. It's not just about testing kids and then forgetting it. It's about using that data to make sure that we're honing in on exactly what they need. Then the 5th step is about making sure that we build a system of interventions. So at the moment that any student shows failure in our school, we immediately activate all the systems and processes in our school to make a difference in the kids' lives. Then the next step is about purposeful collaboration, which is this notion that as educators, we all have strengths. My strength may be engaging kids through music. Your strength may be teaching kids math. But we have to collaborate, talk about the kids together, and figure out strategies to go forward. And then the last step, the 7th step, is about harnessing technology. We're in an amazing time with what's going on with technology that can advance kids. They can literally ask ChatGPT any question, and they'd probably get the answer. So education is going to pivot from being just about what you know to how you can apply and analyze what you know and make a difference. But that takes me to this notion of academic optimism, which underpins the 7 steps. And it's this belief that if it's a belief that I have to have in myself that I'm going to make a difference. And what we know is that the best teachers believe that it's their job to make a difference. And if for no other reason than grit and perseverance alone, they're going to give whatever they take, whatever they have to make a difference, and do whatever it takes to make a difference for kids. And so that's what I try to drive through these 7 steps is your job is not just about to make it fun. It's about to make it rigorous while you make it fun. It's about to make sure that kids love it while you make it fun. It's about to make sure that you're moving them forward. And we put these structures in place and these curriculum and everything you talked about, which sound like it can be structures and boring and basic or whatever, but it really is about finding a way to hone in on personalizing experience for every student, make a difference in their lives.
I love it. I think the 7 steps are bang on with respects to the individual components that are important to focus on. Particularly piece around technology. I mean, again, we're here in an era now where, with thanks to AI, the answers aren't as important anymore. It's just how you got there. And I can certainly see, and I've had conversations with individuals that AI is a downfall of our society because our students our kids aren't know how to think anymore. And I think it's pivot the way you think, because the piece around this is important to understand is AI is only as good as the questions that you ask, the prompts that you put in. So now we're teaching them how to ask. We're strengthening our communication, how to ask, design and structure appropriate prompts. That is a win. because that's not something that we necessarily always had focused on, where now that we have to increase that focus. And that's just one of the examples. I think overall, there are differences. So we're talking about here, we've got to do things different. I'm going to use the word innovative. We've got to be more innovative on how we do things, because our society has changed. The other part about this that sometimes gets lost sort of in education is that teachers aren't just teachers anymore. They're counselors, they're supporters. Some instances they're playing a parental role, depending on the background of the students. There's so much more than to teaching now than maybe the traditional sense. And so I think as we talk about the evolution of education, these are some of the things that we've got to bear in mind.
Yeah. Well, you talk about being innovative, and I have a pretty simple definition of innovation. It's something that's newer and better. But so many times we hear about innovation, it's just what's newer, but it's not actually better. And when I think about AI, the key to success with AI is that humans have to be in the middle. Sure, I don't want a teacher designing a lesson using AI, delivering the lesson using AI, the student taking notes using AI, the completing the assignment that the teacher gave them using AI, and then at the end, nobody actually learned anything. But
Right.
the key is to break those steps up and make sure that there's a human interaction in each of those steps. So the teacher might create a lesson in AI, but they deliver it themselves. And they really make that connection with the students and make sure that they're learning and check in with the kids and all of that. And the student might take notes with AI, but they're certainly going to do their projects, and they're going to do their work, and they're going to write and experience.
Right.
And teachers have got to save time for that in class, so that we're making sure that they're having that human experience. And yeah, the teacher may grade it with AI, but they still need to read it as well, so they can react with the student and think through what they're learning, and help them think through new steps and
Right.
what interests them, and it'll help them create better lessons. And so for me, this moment that we're having with AI and how it's going to impact education is about using it to make what we're doing better, not to replace what we're doing.
Yep, new and better for sure. I'd love to get your thoughts on the role of curiosity and how that factors into the education process. I'm a big fan of curiosity in general. I love talking about it, but certainly I can see how important a curious element is to learn, imparting information, gaining insights as well too.
Yeah. So curiosity to me as an educator is that spark that is going to make someone want to learn something, not because they're being told to, but because they want to learn it for themselves. And that's what can make curiosity special in education. And as a teacher, it's our job to develop curiosity in our students. And I go back to that story about writing that Outcast song out for my kids. What I was doing with that was finding a way to engage in their interests and all of that, sure. But I wanted them to see that these notes that I was teaching them are put together in a very unique way that can help people experience music in a different way and feel things in a different way because of that music. And maybe that would develop a curiosity in my students to go listen to the radio that night, or go listen to a
Right.
CD, which, back then we had CDs. It was all streaming. Go back and listen to that. And then, maybe come into class tomorrow and you wrote your own new beat, or you wrote your own new melody, or you transcribed what somebody else did. And that curiosity is what's going to make them better, because I could tell them to practice their scales or their notes or whatever every day. But if they're not curious and wanting to learn on their own, they're not going to do it on their own. They might do it for the practice record or the grade or whatever else.
Right.
But if we really want kids to love learning, we really want kids to be successful in life, they've got to be curious enough to go and find the information for themselves.
Yeah. I want to sort of talk about the leadership aspect of the work that you do. I'd imagine, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, I would imagine though, when you look at your journey and you've kind of come up again from band director all the way up to the White House, that your experiences have informed the work that you do in a leadership capacity. So I'd really love to kind of hear about sort of what sort of things have you taken and you applied from a leadership sense that to sort of help strengthen the education system.
Yeah, well, and this is where I go back to that. If you're going to be maniacal about anything, be maniacal about people. And so for me, the number one reason I think that I've been successful is that I've been able to build amazing teams around me. And then using that culture of yes, developing a culture where each of them felt like they had space to be innovative and go find new and better solutions for our students.
Right.
And the one of the biggest things in leadership that I believe in is hiring people that have a skill set that's better than me or different than what I think my strengths are. And so, for me, I'm always thinking about vision and strategy and what's the long game and how are we going to make a difference and all of that. And then I know I need to hire people around me that are strategic and tactical and, create plans and can think through all the steps that it takes to get things done. Now, I think I do that well as well. But, people that really thrive in that environment. And then I need people around me that, know budgeting and auditing and accounting practices so that we can make sure, we're meeting all the rules and regulations. And then I need policy people that understand, how the General Assembly or Congress or whoever is going to think about this and how we're going to have to activate on that to make a difference. And so for me, the key to leadership has been about finding those people that complement your skills, believe in a shared vision together, and then can activate on that vision to make a difference.
When you think of all those hats that you've worn, what we're hearing, right? Like those experiences have really fed into your leadership framework and approach, which is so key because you're picking up along the way and you're really starting. And because you were from the grassroots, if you will, on the way up, you really are making decisions and choices that are relevant to your experiences of what you've gone through and how you feel it can frame and help the whole system as a whole. Yeah, no,
I mean, that's right. And it's what I love about the stories that you tell on this podcast, because when I think about the difference that we're trying to make in my journey in kids' lives, it is about realizing that our job, as the superintendent, I used to say, I didn't teach kids anymore by the time I got to what they call the central office. But, there were nearly 65, 70,000 kids in the largest school district I was in. By the time I was state superintendent, there were 1.3 million kids in the state. Not a single one of us would be here if it wasn't about that experience between the teacher and the student. And so that, I woke up every day thinking my job is to be a steward to everyone that works with me to make sure they have what they need to be successful. And it's what I used to tell people, I'll answer my phone 24/7, 365. And I would do that. If somebody called me with an emergency at 2 a.m, the phone would ring, I'd pick it up and I would answer. And my belief was if I have an answer that you need that can get you back to, at 2 a.m, I hope you're going back to sleep, but back to doing what you need to do for kids, then that's what I'm here for, because there wouldn't be a central office. There wouldn't be a budget office. There wouldn't be a curriculum office if we didn't have groups of students collaborating together to make a difference in their lives, led by teachers. And so every day, all of us in the school district or the principal or whoever, you got to remember that you're there for that moment that the teacher meets with our students. And you've got to make sure that the work you're doing is about lifting up that moment.
I love that. Lifting up that moment. How do you stay motivated, inspired, maintain your level of audacity in a system that, and I'm not going to pretend to know about the U.S. education system. I'm going to use my context here in Canada, but a system that sometimes can be resistant to change or doing things differently. How do you keep yourself going?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. And I mean, you can probably tell a little bit by my spirit. I stay motivated, but for me, it's this notion of impact. And I started there earlier in our conversation where, I wanted to have an impact on my classroom of 25 kids. And I decided to become a principal because I wanted every classroom in my school to have the impact that I thought I was having on kids. And that school, by the way, the one that closed and rehired all the teachers, now one of the best schools in that school district. And then I got to eventually becoming, principal in my own school. And we had scores in some subjects like in the 50s. And a year later, we had scores in the 90s where like almost every kid was passing. And I thought, okay, I want to have that impact on every school in my district, which is why I became a superintendent. And then I became a superintendent, and I wanted to have, every school in my state having the impact that I thought my schools were having. So I became a state superintendent. And then I wanted to have this impact on every school in our country. And so I went, to the federal government and worked in the president's administration and with the Secretary of Education to make a difference in kids' lives. And, then when I got out of what I would call more government education service and I got into the private side of it, I wanted to make sure that the services that we were providing to educators or the products that we were providing were making a difference in kids' lives. And that still keeps me motivated, even though I'm now in the business world. What I know is that the work that we do is going to go back to that, lifting up that moment that I talked about, that the work that we do is going to make a difference so that that teacher can create a better lesson the next day. Or, in the most recent previous job that I had, we created a program where we went into high schools and put programs in place to train high school students on how to become teachers later so they can start that journey earlier in their career and making a difference even while kids are in high school. And so for me, I would never take a job that I didn't feel like I had a way to shift that impact back in the same way downstream so that everyone that I worked with was about making a difference. And so that's how I stay motivated. And the second way I stay motivated, I mentioned I have a 16-year-old son who's better than me at basketball now. But I also have a seventh grade daughter. And so I have two kids in schools. And I actually live in the community where I was last a district superintendent. And now one of my principals from back in the day is the superintendent, and he's doing a great job. And so for me, the other thing I wake up every day thinking is the difference that I'm making for other people's kids now in more of this business world or in all the various jobs I've had is also about making sure that there's a better education for my own kids, that they get a more innovative experience where they're engaged in their learning. They're having experiences where they can lift themselves up. And so for me, I think about that a lot. And that, when I was a district superintendent, my kids were in elementary school. And I knew that I was going to fight for everyone else's kids as hard as I fought for my own. And there's just a special and different relationship that I gained with education when I became a parent. And every day I still think about, hey, I'm a parent and I'm an educator. And I know that every parent wakes up and they want their kids to be safe, number one, but they want their kids to have the best life possible. And that's what we're doing in education. We're ensuring great lives for our kids.
It was interesting because the question I was going to ask you is the legacy that you hope to leave behind in education. I think you kind of touched on some of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what it is for me is I want to know that, whenever I retire, whatever, and spend the rest of my life raising grandkids or whatever else we do, I want to know that we made a difference in kids' lives. I don't need awards. I don't need accolades. I don't need anything like that. I don't need everything that I've done to last forever. What I want to know is that, at that time that people are thinking about education, that they think, you know what, they made a difference in those kids' lives. And that's what makes it, that's what really matters to me.
I love it. I love it. I love it. James, want to have some fun here? Not that we haven't had fun at this point, but let's just take it another level, shall we?
Let's do it.
I like the idea of throwing out some rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to your mind. Let me know what you think. They're all softballs, easy stuff for you. How's that? You okay?
All right, let's do it.
All right. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl for sure. I can stay up until 3 a.m. working out, not working on things, whatever. But for me, waking up, I want to get that sleep.
Got you. First leadership lesson you ever learned?
First leadership lesson. So I remember becoming a section leader in high school marching band as a high school student, and I had to lead my peers, the other kids that were my exact same age. And so the lesson for me was, you can lead from any role, whether you're in the middle of your organization or you're the CEO, like I've had those experiences in my career. You can make a difference and help people move forward.
Is there a book that changed your perspective?
A book, yeah. So Good to Great, I think I even have it behind me, by Jim Collins. If you don't know that book, highly recommend it. But he, that one for me, I talk about this. If you're going to be maniacal about anything, be maniacal about people. He has this thing he calls the first who, then what principle. I'll let y'all read it. I won't explain what it is, but that's one of my favorite lessons.
Biggest risk you ever taken in your career?
Biggest risk. So for me, that jump that I told you about earlier, where, I could have stayed in my district, but driving an hour and a half to work every day in a small county, ended up being the best decision I ever made, and some of the best educators I've ever known I worked with in that community.
As a teacher, music or math, what shapes your thinking more?
It's funny that you say that. You know that musicians are actually better mathematicians because in music we develop spatial intelligence. And so I'm going to say music is equally as impactful as math, but everyone's got to have the basics of math to be successful in our schools.
If you were to define audacious living, how would you do so?
For me, it's about living your best life. And, Jim Collins actually talks about being audacious. He calls it his BHAG, right? That to be a successful CEO, you have to have a big, hairy, audacious goal. That's the BHAG, right? And so for me, the point that he was making there is, what is the one thing that you think you can be the best in the world at? And that's what I tried to find in my career was, and it quickly became making a difference in kids' lives and leading in education. And so for me, being audacious is about going as big as you can to make the difference you want to make.
Love it. And what keeps you going every day then? What keeps that audacity spirit in you every single day?
Well, I drink Diet Mountain Dew, so that starts it. But I go back to kids, right? Like I have my own kids here. I'm watching them grow every day. My son's got a volleyball game tonight. My daughter's going to be dancing. And so for me, what keeps me going is knowing that every moment that I give to education, I'm giving to making a difference in a kid's life.
Mm-hmm. Man, James, this has been great. It's been great. I've really appreciated the insights, the passion for learning that you have. Because if you're passionate about what you do, then others have no choice but to catch that passion and follow along with you. And when you're excited about what you're learning, that enhances the opportunity to learn even more. And so the fact that you're able to do that for your students, yes, you're not in the classroom anymore, but you're now at a level where in leadership that you can influence others with that same passion that you have that will trickle down to the students. So congratulations, a fabulous career. I know you got lots to do. I'm not shutting you down or retiring you. I'm just saying congratulations on the work that you've done now. It's absolutely wonderful. Very, very inspiring. Certainly appreciative. And I appreciate you for being a guest here on the Audacious Living Podcast.
No, thank you for having me. I see that jersey behind you. It's great to talk to the Odd Man. I love you guys' nickname on there. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for having me. And for those out there that are educators, we're here for you and going to make a difference.
Let's quickly, before we forget here, let's make sure that we give the contact details for our listeners that want to connect with you directly. And also the name of your book again and where they can get it.
Yeah, so the book is Leading with Laser Focus, the 7 Steps to School Success. You can find it on Amazon. We actually became an Amazon #1 bestseller last week, so should be able to find it there. But if you want to look for me, you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Dr. James Lane. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think it's like the LinkedIn whatever /James F. Lane. But if anyone ever wants to engage with me, have any questions, just reach out.
Amazing. James, like I said, this has been great. Lots of fun. We'll make sure that all the contact details in the show notes below and drive our listeners to connect with you directly. Thanks again for the time. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So great to talk with you. Thanks for having me on.
Back we are here on the podcast, and when I think about the conversation with James, what really stood out was the unwavering belief in people. Whether he was talking about students, teachers, or leaders, everything came back to trust. Trusting people to grow, trusting them to rise, trusting them to meet the moment when given the right support. I loved how he reframed innovation not as chasing the newest tool, but as creating environments where curiosity can thrive. That idea that learning happens best when people feel safe enough to explore and brave enough to try something new, that one really stayed with me. His story reminded me that audacity is not about being loud or disruptive. Sometimes it's about quietly believing in someone before they believe in themselves. And I know all about that. If you want to connect with James and continue the conversation or more about his work, you can find him directly. Certainly he's got a book, Leading with Laser Focus. We talked about that, 7 Steps to School Success. That's on Amazon. He's on Twitter. X and Instagram at Dr. James Lane, also on LinkedIn. And we're going to make sure that all those details and the links are in the show notes. At this time, James doesn't have any special offers, but his book is ongoing and thought leadership. So be sure to follow his work for upcoming projects and insights. If there's one thing to take away from this conversation, it's this. Progress does not come from knowing all the answers. It comes from staying curious enough to keep asking better questions. When we create environments where people feel safe to explore, to fail, and to grow, we unlock something powerful. That's where the learning becomes alive. That's where leadership becomes meaningful, and that's where audacity truly lives. I want to thank you for spending part of your day with me here on the Audacious Living Podcast. If this conversation resonated with you, please take a moment to follow, or share this episode with someone who could use a little encouragement to live more boldly. Your support helps this message reach more people who are ready to step into their best, most audacious lives. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep living audaciously.
Driven by purpose, fueled by passion. My words got power, my thoughts have action. Motivation, stay gracious. That's greatness. Be audacious.